So this video is directed to one person and one person only, and that is Phil Spencer, the CEO of Xbox Game Studios. So anyone else is welcome to watch it. No one's going to, not even Phil Spencer. But I'm putting it out there anyway because there is a definite increase in the number of games that are being released specifically on Xbox, but perhaps on other platforms and probably on PC as well, that are not being released as promised. And I'm not talking like little bugs and glitches that are inevitable in any game, in many products that are released. But, you know, we're being told the games are going to be at a certain level or in a certain state or with certain specific features, and then they're not. And sometimes this information is actually being hidden from the consumer. So I was going to for a long time, I've wanted to do this kind of video, and I was going to do one with Cyberpunk, Redfall, and The Lord of the Rings Gollum, because those are three of the most egregious examples in my mind, and two of them are extremely recent. But I decided to break it all up, and I'm going to start with this one with Redfall and you, Mr. Spencer. So, with all that being said, I'm doing this off the top of my head. I'm using a PC Gamer article from December 2020 that references direct quotes from your apology. And I am not a lawyer. There's no legal insight or intention of legal insight to my commentary. I am using words that do have legal connotation at times, but I am using them in a dictionary definition. So, with all that being said, let me begin. And this shouldn't take too long, but again, it's a PC Gamer article from May 4th, 2023, this year, barely over a month ago, and the title of the article is Phil Spencer apologizes for Redfall's disappointing launch, but promises to keep working on it. So I've highlighted the sections of quotes that I'd like to use, and there's one more tab that has another sentence on it. So you can see it's not going to be that long, Mr. Spencer. My commentary will make it longer, but I think there's going to be some insight for you. Let me begin with the first paragraph. Quote, I'm disappointed. I'm upset with myself, Spencer said. I kind of revisit our process. I think back to the announcement of 60 frames per second, and then we weren't shipping 60 frames per second. That was kind of our punch in the chin, rightfully, a couple weeks ago. And then seeing the game come out and the critical response was not what we wanted, it's disappointing. So, you are the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company, and you can't apologize. An apology starts with, I'm sorry. It doesn't get buried into the next to last sentence in the second paragraph. Let's set that aside. We'll come back to that. Let's just deal with what we have here. I'm disappointed are your first choices, your first choice of words. You're disappointed? How do you think the consumer feels, Mr. Spencer? This is not about you in so much that it was not your money that was being paid for a product. You are on the selling end of a contractual transaction. The buyer, the consumer, the customer is the one who is the victim here, and they are the ones who own the disappointment that you sold them. You're upset with yourself. Well, yes, so is everyone else, Mr. Spencer. You revisit the process, you think back to the announcement of 60 frames per second, and then you weren't shipping 60 frames per second. Whose choice was that, Mr. Spencer? Because you have the power of God in your little finger that could have stopped this. If I am not mistaken, Redfall was delayed at least one time before this. You could have delayed this game. You have the power. You chose not to. You announced 60 frames per second. If a car manufacturer announces a 600 horsepower car and doesn't deliver that, they are selling the consumer something that is not the correct product. If they were to, let's say, hide that information from the consumer, what would that be, Mr. Spencer? More on that in a moment. That was kind of our punch in the chin, rightfully, a couple weeks ago. No, Mr. Spencer, that is not a punch in your chin. That is you punching the consumer in the face as you are taking their wallet. This is not about you and your feelings. This is about us. And then seeing the game come out. Seeing the game come out? Aren't you the gatekeeper? You are the CEO. You had to have been aware. And if you weren't, what are you doing? Because whoever you put in charge of this project had to have come to you and said, we aren't where we're supposed to be. We promised something we're not delivering. You had to have known. And if you didn't know, then someone should be fired because they didn't inform you, and that should be their job. The critical response was not what we wanted. This isn't about a critical response, Mr. Spencer. The product was not what we wanted. The product that we purchase was not what you told us it was going to be. You did not deliver what you promised. It's disappointing. Yes, Mr. Spencer. On that, I think we can all agree. But so is your apology so far. Moving on to the second paragraph. Quote, I want to give the Xbox teams the creative platform to go and push their abilities, push their aspirations. But I also need to have a great selection of games that continue to surprise and delight our fans, and we under-delivered on that. And for that, I apologize. It's not what I expect, not what I want. There is a lot to unpack here, Mr. Spencer. First, I don't see how anyone, including yourself, could read that first sentence without thinking you're throwing your team under the bus. This is not about your team and encouraging them or pushing them and their abilities and their aspirations. This is about you making a commitment to the consumer that we can expect a certain level of product and you not delivering. If the team could not deliver the product as you stated, that product is not viable. It either needs to be delayed and brought up to speed and standards, or you need to shelf it or completely eliminate it, or you need to inform the consumer that the product is not going to be what was promised. Here is what the product is, and let the consumer make an informed decision if they want to continue with this business transaction. but I also need to have a great collection of games. Well, there we go. There's the admission. This is why the game did not get delayed. Is that correct, Mr. Spencer? Because you wanted it out there so you could inflate the bank account, so you could get it on, off, you could get it out of production and into the market. There is the most honest thing I've heard you say so far. To surprise and delight our fans. Well, surprise you did. And this isn't about fans. You're a businessman, sir. This is about consumers. You keep using these euphemisms, and this is why I want to do this for other games, because this is an epidemic, sir. It's becoming an epidemic where these apologies continue to happen, and they're always couched in these pseudo apologies with these euphemisms that we're disappointing our fans. No, sir. No, sir. You are screwing the consumer. You are misleading the consumer. You are taking money which you are not earning. You underdelivered. You can say that again. And for that, I apologize. Well, here we go. We got an apology in here. Why did you bury it so deep inside of this? It's couched in language that throws your employees under the bus, that undermines the business relationship you have and the business responsibility that you've undertaken to bring a product to market that meets the standards you set out for it. It's not what I want, it's not what I expect, not what I want. If it's not what you expect, it is what you want, because you made the decision to bring the product to market. You allowed it to happen. Am I incorrect, sir, in remembering that there was an embargo on this product? Wasn't there an embargo on Redfall where reviews and potential gameplay couldn't be shown until like the 12th hour before release of the game? Why is that? Why do companies, gaming companies, continue to get to hide substandard at best, and I don't even know what to call it at worst? But why do you keep getting to hide that you're misinforming the consumer until the last minute? That is some of the shadiest shit. Sorry, I'm trying to be polite. I'm trying to be responsible, and I'm very, very angry that you're not taking responsibility. You are not delivering what you promised, and you are not apologizing here. There's a famous quote, "The buck stops here." Is that not the quintessential apology from a leader? I mean, how much power is behind that quote? The buck stops here. I am in charge. All the blame is mine. I take full responsibility, period. As a manager, as a CEO, I would think you would know that we as leaders, we as managers, we defer credit, we accept blame. Period. My staff, my employees, they deserve the credit. I accept the blame when things go wrong. I've said this countless times in my life. Maybe you do that in every other instance. Maybe this one just got done wrong. But this is egregious, sir. This is some of the worst business management I've seen. Let's move on to the next paragraph. This is does not start off as a quote, obviously, but the comment of the author of this article. But it does have a quote from, or some quotes in here from you, and it seems to encapsulate your opinion. So I'm going to read it anyway. Interestingly, Spencer said delaying Redfall's release wouldn't have solved its most fundamental problems because while there are clearly, quote, quality issues, the bigger problem is that, quote, the game isn't realizing the creative vision it had for its players, close quote. No, sir. No, sir, no, sir, no, sir. It isn't about the game realizing the creative vision. Again, it's not about the quality issues. It's about you and your company selling a game that did not deliver what you promised at the time of transaction. And the embargo only exacerbates the problem. Fourth paragraph, quote, that doesn't feel like a, hey, just delay it, Spencer said. That feels like the game had a goal to do one thing, and when players are actually playing, they're not feeling that thing. They're not feeling the creative execution of the team. You know, it's hard not to drop an F-bomb on you here, because now you're couching your pseudo apology between throwing your team under the bus at the beginning of this and at the end of this. This is not about the creative execution of the team. It's not about creativity. It's about delivering what you promised. That's it. That's all this is. And if it's not if you're going to deliver the product, then you have to let the consumer know. You know this. You're misleading everyone in this apology. This is not an apology because you've never taken responsibility for what you've done here. The closest you came was saying you announced 60 frames per second and then you weren't shipping that. I'm just using that as the sole example because that's the sole instance I can find where you admit the game didn't live up to what you promised. But I'm sure there are many other instances if I want to continue to look. I don't need any more. I only need one, this one. Sir, I highly recommend you quit throwing your teams under the bus when you are the ultimate decision maker. This is beneath the CEO. This is beneath a freaking night manager. This is beneath a shift manager. It's pathetic. Let me move on to your last sentence I wanted to read. Quote, but I also know that these games are $70, Spencer said, and I'm going to take full responsibility for launching a game that needs to be great. Bullshit. You've never taken full responsibility in this. Never. And is there a magic fairy who made these games $70? No, sir, you did. You raised the price from $60 for a AAA title to $70. You and you alone. Full responsibility for launching a game that needs to be great. The game does not need to be great, Mr. Spencer. It needs to be what you promised. It just needs to be what you promised. If you promised 60 frames per second, the game needs to be sold at 60 frames per second. If it's not going to be sold at 60 frames per second, then that embargo has got to come off. Or the game has got to be delayed. Or you need to shelf it. Or you need to inform the consumer so they can decide if they want to pay $70 for a 30 frame per second game. Or you need to frickin' lower the price, which you have the ability to do. Do you see why now, Mr. Spencer, I decided to take your apology out and start with it rather than with Cyberpunk 2077, where I had originally intended to start this and put your apology in the middle of a video? I understand embargoes. I understand they serve a purpose. You want to keep the hype up. You want to surprise the consumer. That in and of itself is not a bad thing. But when you hide the substandard condition of a game that's not going to meet the expectations you set for it, and I'm not talking gameplay where like, oh, it's not fun. I'm talking like bare bones, functionality of the game. I don't think I could find a better dictionary definition of fraud or defraud. This is happening way too often. It has to stop at some point. Consumers cannot continue to be expected to pay full price for products, video games in this instance, and then, oh, well, the game was just released. We'll fix it down the road. I don't want to spend any money on a game at release, whether it's $15, $50, or $100, to have it 3 months later, 6 months later, when it's already on sale now, be fully functional. Even as a Game Pass subscriber, which I am, I would not accept you putting this game on Game Pass without informing us it isn't meeting the expectations of what you had for it when you were going to sell it. But I could at least say, okay, well, he's bringing it to Game Pass, but he's not going to sell it on the market at this point because they need to get it to the point that he said. That I could understand. But then it's a game preview, isn't it? Stop making us beta testers at best for these games, because unless you're going to start either one, not charging us for it, or two, paying us. And stop. I understand when you don't have control over the company, but this is your company. This is all your company. Redfall was your product. It wasn't a third-party product. I've gone on way too long, Mr. Spencer. But I think I'm not so delusional to think you will ever watch this or hear my commentary. But maybe someone who works in your company will see this and just say, Jesus Christ, maybe someone should at least consider the ramifications of what's going on here. I'm going to do video on, for anyone else, if anyone else watched this, I appreciate you. I do the most boring, horrible videos with the worst audio setup on YouTube. I'm proud of it. And I uh, am going to do another video on Cyberpunk 2077. I'm going to do one on the Lord of the Rings Gollum and its apology. And then I'm going to do a video where I wrap it all up and try to show that this problem of video games being released in conditions that aren't promised, in a way that is not giving the consumer um, the ability to educate themselves before the time of purchase, and how this is just it's escalating. It's absolutely escalating, and the problem is only going to get worse. And I have one idea of why this is happening, and it's actually an age gap thing. So stay tuned.